Hi, this is Pat McDonald, your host for Vote for Vermont, where our tagline is Listening Beyond the Soundbites. Ben Kinsley is joining us remotely. Hello, Ben.
Hi, Pat. How are you?
Good, thank you. Long time no see. We've been testifying most of the afternoon in Senate GovOps, just the two
I
of
know
us.
we spend most of today in Senate GovOps together.
Exactly. It's kind of fun. It's kind of like being back in the legislature. It's kind of cool. And I have
Almost.
I have a special guest with me today. For those of you who have been driving down Route 302 and looking to the right and seeing what's happening to the Twin Cities Motel, right?
It was the Twin Cities Motel.
What used to be the Twin Cities Motel. And I'm going to be able to tell you today with my guests what is happening to that motel, plus a lot of great stuff. So I want to introduce Rick Deangelis, who's the Executive Director for the Good Samaritan Haven. And we're going to talk about serving people with dignity in their time of need. And in this weather, there is a lot of need. And I understand from Rick, there's also a need because of COVID. So welcome to the show. This is your first time. We were on WDEV together, about 2 weeks ago?
Yeah, right before Christmas. That was really delightful. I enjoyed it so
You're
much.
a star. You'd be making you a star here.
Yeah, people are still talking about that
That's
interview.
Great.
So.
Well, I hope they talk about this show too. So tell us a little bit about yourself and about the Good Samaritan.
Yeah, I'd be glad to. It's seems very fortuitous that I'm here today to talk about this subject, where this is one of the colder days of the winter, which presents a special challenge for the work that Good Samaritan Haven does. And we're also right in the thick of the second wave of the COVID pandemic.
Right.
And pretty much all day long I've been dealing with those two things, but I'm glad to actually get out of the office and come here and talk with you. So,
Great. Are you at capacity right now with helping all the folks you help?
Yeah, we are at capacity right now.
Yeah.
Everything is filled in
Yeah.
Washington County.
Somewhere I was reading that it's become an emergency in different places around the state where there's no more beds, and they've got to really scramble to find beds, whether it be at churches or wherever, to find some place for these folks to sleep and get out of the cold. Pretty serious.
That's for sure. You know, Pat, I have been tracking the numbers for Washington County and statewide since the beginning of 2020, and they have not been any higher than they are right now. In Washington County alone, there are 400 individuals who are either in a emergency motel room, a shelter, or God forbid they're outside tonight, but there are some people who are actually outside tonight.
Right.
So it's really extraordinary. And of those 400 people, again, this is Washington County. It's not like we're New York City or anything like
Right.
that. There are 50 children who are living in motel rooms. And that's got to be a tough thing for them and their families.
For sure. We'll have to talk about that a little bit more. Then you want to jump in here? Yeah.
Yeah. So explain, Rick, maybe you can explain a little bit about what it is that, what services you're providing, and what does your program look like? Who
Sure.
has access to
Sure.
it? Those sorts of things.
Yeah, I'd be delighted to tell you about Good Samaritan Haven. It's a very special organization. Good Sam was created about 35 years ago right here in central Vermont, Barrie. And, in those early days, it was serving a need, but it was a much more modest need. Looking back over the original paperwork and documentation, when our first shelter was opened in 1987, and it was basically a single-family house that was converted to a shelter. We were serving 8 to 12 people a night. Unfortunately, over the years, that's changed. Both the scale of homelessness in Washington County, but also I think the nature of what homelessness is. And the problem and the needs of people have become more complex. Substance abuse is an important factor, mental illness, and of course, poverty is at the root of homelessness. So from those years when we were serving 8 people a night, as I just said, there are 400 people homeless in Washington County today. And our program is directly housing, right at this time, 50 people. And we're doing outreach to many more. So when you ask me what do we provide, what is our basic service, it's really very simple. Our job is to protect life and to welcome people who come to our door who have nowhere else to go. And I was thinking today about my job as the executive Good Samaritan Haven. In a sense, decision making is very simple because I use that test. Is the thing in front of me and the decision that I have to make, is it going to help protect life? And if so, I do everything I can to just marshal the resources to do that.
That's great. That's not so simple. Saying about saving a life, that's pretty daunting in my mind. It's a serious responsibility. It may be easy to get food and warmth and shelter, but you also, I know you come up with a plan for individuals if they're staying for any length of time to get them, the mental health they need, to get them health care. I mean, how do you go about assessing what I walk in and you don't know me from Adam, and how do you start assessing what I need?
Yeah, great question, Pat. The first order of business is you help protect that person with shelter and food and any healthcare needs, immediate healthcare needs. But then perhaps a much more daunting challenge is to build a relationship with individuals.
Yeah.
Very often folks have been traumatized in some way. They might have a mental health barrier or substance abuse. So you have to cultivate a relationship, build a relationship, and work with them to determine, what are their goals, what do they need, what can they do, and what can you do to help them to be in a better place in the coming weeks and months.
You said you've had 50 children under your care. I mean, that's a family dynamic that has to be nurtured or kept the family together or help them. That's some additional problems than just an individual coming in, right?
Well, families are a very special case, and our program doesn't work directly with families. We focus mostly on individuals. We do have some presence and some providing some services in the motels, but we don't generally work very specifically with families. But certainly, and the number one priority with families that we've all agreed is essential here in the state of Vermont is as soon as possible we want to get a family in their own apartment.
Right.
And so there are a few emergency apartments here in Washington County.
Is that where I read about Heaney Real Estate? Is that how they help you?
Well, Heaney
Because I went, whoa, I wonder what he's up to.
Well, that's great. They've been very important partners and supporters of us, and also the Family Center of Washington County. They have contributed to trying to help families in need.
Right, great.
So I just, I would
No.
just add to that, so that set of challenges and problems, it's a big job at any time. But over the last 2 years, we've had this overlay of COVID. And, I started the job in, January 2020. And then, I read this news article in the New York Times about this COVID thing that we should be paying attention to. Little did I know that it would become kind of the primary focus of my
Right.
work for the next 2 years. So that was very interesting. And 2020 and 21 were special challenges like I've never seen. But in a way, the second wave has proved even more difficult.
Really? Well, I mean, I have not been affected by God, thank God, by any of this. I just know 2 people who have had it, but very mild and have recovered.
Well, the Omicron variant is much more contagious. And as far as we're seeing, our experience, we didn't have one guest during 20 and 21 that had a reported case of COVID-19.
Great.
In the past week, we've had 5 guests from all of our facilities who have tested positive for COVID. And as of this afternoon, I think we've had 3 staff people as well.
Oh, no.
So that presents a special challenge because we are working in a congregate environment. People can't just shut their door and quarantine
Right.
In their home. They're sharing rooms with others. So we have to do everything we can to isolate folks, get them to a safe environment so that we're not spreading the virus to others.
Great.
Yeah, it's a challenge. I mean, the list of people that I know who have now had COVID or currently have COVID are is pretty soon going to be longer than the list of people that don't.
Really?
So that shift is rapidly happening, and it's everywhere right now. Like it's everywhere, and it's a challenge to navigate that.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Can you talk a little?
Go ahead, sure.
No, if you have
Well,
anything else to add to
I
that.
just want to add on to that in that, so when we do find a positive case with one of our guests, we have to isolate them. And there are some resources, limited resources. There's a motel in Burlington, the Ho Hum Motel,
Oh, right.
which is a quarantine site for homeless individuals. And we moved 3 people there last week. But the Ho Hum was completely filled at that time. And we had 2 more cases pop up. And I was able to place both those people in local motels in their own room. And we're lending some support to them. But right before I came over tonight, I had a request for another motel room. And I was not able to find a hotel room in Central Vermont tonight. So.
Wow.
This is what we're up against at this time.
Oh.
Yeah, definitely. I can't even imagine, like, you have shared spaces like that, and how do you keep people safe and separate? Yeah, I can't even imagine what a challenge that must be.
Well, especially in a motel, they can't go out. So what do they do about food and clothing and just basic essentials? Do you provide that for them, or is there a service that
Yes,
does
we
that?
are supporting people in
Right.
those motel
Wow,
rooms.
good for you.
But of course, again, people are in the rooms by themselves.
Right.
We can't control that they're staying in that room all the time, and that's the case in the shelters as well. I mean, we can't mandate that people stay in the shelters. We can't mandate that our guests be tested or vaccinated. We
Right.
can require that they wear masks, but of course they can't be wearing a mask all the time because they're eating in the shelter
Right.
and they're sleeping in the shelter.
Good grief.
It's not a pretty thing, and
No.
I've had a lot of anxiety over the last couple of weeks,
I bet.
especially with this Omicron variant.
Well, you have overflow shelters, as you mentioned, right? And some of them are in churches. I remember the Barry Congregational Church was asked if we wanted to be an overflow church, and there were some others around that have accepted your guests, and that's
yes.
great. I mean, it's not exactly set up for sleeping, but it's still warm, and there's a kitchen there, and there's
Well, think
amenities.
about being out tonight. I mean, it's got to be below zero tonight.
Oh, for sure.
And there are quite a few people out on the streets. I live here in Montpelier, and others who have been in Montpelier lately are probably seeing people outside.
Yep.
There's a little shelter-covered shelter near Shaw's right now.
Yep, right.
And a lot of those folks
Stay
are
there.
hanging out there during the day. And but one thing we've been able to do to address that need is that we're working with Green Mountain Transit, and they've opened up their bus station
Nice.
right downtown. And during the day, they're allowing people to be in the bus station when their staff is there. And at 6 o'clock when their staff leaves, we're staffing that facility
Great.
until 9 o'clock at night. And at that point, people can go to the Christchurch shelter, which we're operating. So there's kind of a patchwork
Yeah.
of places to be safe and warm, hopefully. But it's not perfect. But I'm hoping that, again, that we are protecting people and keeping them alive for
Right.
a better day.
Right. Well, and I'm sure they're very grateful, because just to have a place that's warm and out of the weather has got to be a plus.
You know, people say that to me a lot. I'm not in the shelter all the time. It's more on going from location to location. But I can't tell you how often that we call folks who are in our shelters our guests. But again and again, people thank me and tell me
Yeah.
how grateful they
I
are.
have to say something, because I said it when we were on WDV. Most of the homeless people I have met, I don't want to go into the stories, but they are really very nice people. They're just in a bad situation, and they're not going to do you any harm, or they're not scary, and I know there are some that perhaps would cause you some concern, but for the most part, they're very nice people. They're just in a bad situation. Is that not true?
You know,
That's my experience.
you mentioned that to me in the during the WDEV
Right.
interview, and a couple of people have mentioned your comment to me in
Oh,
the
really?
exchange that we had, and I said to them, I said, you know, I can't tell you how many times I have been talking with someone, or they've called me up, and they've told me that their son or a daughter or a relative or someone that they know has been homeless or
Right.
is homeless.
Right.
And that, when I hear that, I'm very moved by it, because it really illustrates to me that the folks who are homeless are like anybody else. They could be you or I,
Right.
if not for
Right.
a little bit of luck or whatever.
Yep.
So I think it's important to remember that. It's not to say that there aren't some difficult behavior sometimes,
Right, for sure.
but they're human beings. So
Exactly. Ben, you want to take that away?
Sure. Yeah. So if I'm a person looking to stay at your emergency shelter, what what are some of the expectations? Well, first, what's available to me, and second, what are the expectations of me staying in the emergency shelter, one of the ones that you operate?
well, right at this moment, we would unfortunately have to tell you that we're completely full. And but let's hope that you call on a day that we actually do have a bed available. We currently operate 3 shelters. Our main shelter at the moment is the Seminary Street in Barry, and that's a congregate-style facility where people are sleeping in a bunk room, essentially, with others. And we provide meals, and folks are allowed, they're allowed to be in all day in this kind of weather. But normally, in the warmer weather, we are required to have people leave the facility during the day. It's been part of our zoning since we opened up there. The second choice, or another choice, would be we run a shelter in Barry Town that we opened up this fall. And that is, those rooms are semi-private. They're shared rooms. It's a larger facility. It's more generous. And people have more independence there. Most of the folks who are in the South Barry shelter, they're employed. And we're hoping that they're closer to, finding and reestablishing themselves in their own housing situation. And then finally, and it's really the most challenging environment, we do have a walk-in, what's called an overnight overflow shelter, and this year that's at the Christchurch in Montpelier, and that's pretty basic, Ben. It's you get a cot on the floor in a big room, and we open at 8 o'clock at night, and you have to leave at 8 o'clock in the morning.
Yes. Why do they make these guests leave during the day? I shared a story with you that I had a problem down at the Department of Labor when we were in the capstone building, because when these people would have to leave, they would sort of tend to come to the Department of Labor and sit on the computers
Right.
and you know, but sadly, we'd either have to ask them to leave or to go sit in an office or something, because we really felt sorry for them. I mean, why do they make them leave? Why can't they stay?
Well, you know, that's a great question. You know, we've had the Barry shelter since 1985, 86, and that was embedded in our zoning requirements. And it's been modified somewhat, but it's still in place. I'm really hopeful. I've talked to Mayor Herring and some of the councilors, and I think they're open to supporting a change in that zoning
Because
requirement.
that makes absolutely no sense to me.
I think folks are beginning to realize it's not good for the neighborhood or
Nope.
or for the shelter or for the folks involved. So I'm hopeful we can change that. Right now with the Christchurch shelter, the Overflow that I mentioned, it's really a necessity because we're using borrowed space. Staffing is a challenge. Let me tell you, it's not easy to provide
Right.
24/7 staffing. And so we just have to do it that way. It's just a stopgap measure under the
I
circumstances.
honestly am sitting here, I cannot imagine one real reason why I would make your guests leave. I don't even understand what problem they were trying to resolve. I mean, they don't make large families leave their home during the day.
Yeah,
What,
yeah.
What is the difference?
I don't know. And you know, you mentioned the Twin City project that we're going to be opening up this spring. That is not going to be a requirement.
That's
at
great.
Twin City.
Well, I mean, especially if it's 20 degrees out or 0 degrees. I mean, you don't get warm, ever.
And think about it. You know, you're on your feet all day long.
Right.
You're going from the library to the
Department of
emergency
Labor.
room or whatever. It's if you weren't traumatized when you came in,
For
you're
sure.
probably traumatized
That's
after
great
that.
service. Very clever thinking. Ben, you got some?
Yeah, I think so. Say that someone does, you do have space available, and someone does come to stay with you. How long does someone typically stay, and are there any restrictions on how long they can stay?
Yeah, sure. Yes, our agreement, what we offer guests is they can stay for 90 days if they abide by our house rules and they're not disruptive or anything. And so during that 90 days, our offer to them is you're welcome to be here. You know, you have the shelter, we'll provide food. But to stay beyond that 90 days, we expect you to engage with us on a program of trying to meet your needs and get you the services and whatever you need to get out of the shelter. If somebody during that 90 days, they make an effort and they're working with us, but not all the cards have lined up, we're glad to extend it. But if you've done nothing to help yourself during those 90 days, then we may end your stay at that point in time.
Well, that's fair.
You know, the point of it isn't to be a permanent solution
Right.
to your emergency. The point is to help you out and protect you and help you get on your way to a better solution.
Well, you know, we mentioned the capstone has the best tagline. It says, we don't want to, we're not giving you a hand out, we're giving you a hand up.
Sure.
And I think that's a perfect way to explain what you're trying to do. Get you all the services you need and maybe get a little push.
Well, there's, you know, Good Samaritan was originally a religious organization. We
Oh.
are no longer, but our roots are in the Christian tradition. And there's a saying, I'm sure you've both heard, the Lord helps those who help themselves.
There you go.
So
That's right.
we'll work in partnership to help you help yourself. So
Good job. That's great.
So what options are available to someone? Let's say they go, they participate in your program, they do the 90 days. You know, they didn't make any real progress, and you have to excuse them from the program. What options are available to them at that point? Like, are they just out of luck? Did they have to kind of reevaluate where they are and come back in the future? Like
Yeah.
what are the what options are there for
interesting.
those people?
Interesting.
Well, it's pretty tough. I mean, there may not be any great options other than going out on the street. And there certainly are people who have burned many bridges, and some of those folks are actually, at times of the year sleeping outside. Our Overflow shelter in Montpelier, some of the folks that use that Overflow shelter have been what we call exited from our main shelter, or they've been exited from the Motel program as well. So,
Well, Ben asked a very interesting question. If after they go back out
yeah.
and deal with the cold and all that stuff, and they go, maybe this wasn't a wise decision, are they allowed to come back and do it again?
Well,
If they're
sure,
really sincere, I mean, at some point, I'm hoping that they realize perhaps your offer is a good deal.
Well, sure. We review people. We have a list of people who have been exited from the program, and we reevaluate that.
Oh, good.
We're pretty much soft-hearted helpers, and we don't, we'll do what we can to protect somebody and
That's
help
great.
them.
I can imagine the position that puts you in, though. If you have limited space, clearly you have very limited space right now. You're very, very constrained for capacity, and you have to make a decision. You have one bed for the night, and you give it to someone who's exited the program and is requesting to come back, or someone brand new who's coming in and is like and hasn't doesn't have that background or that history, and you have to make a decision, like, who do you give that to? Because if you give it to someone who's already maybe not committed to the program before in the past, versus leaving that spot available to someone else, right? That's got to be a difficult position to be in.
Yeah, I don't think
Well,
I'd
there's a
like
good
that.
deal of triage with the program that we offer.
Right.
I mean, we're often shuttling people around to different locations or trying to find motel rooms when we're full.
Yeah,
So-
well, speaking of motels, I'm going to skip to the Twin City Motel. Tell us about what you're doing there, because it's fascinating. Not as much equipment there, so that's a good sign, because I have no idea how those guys found room in that space to park all that equipment and use it. I mean, that was very impressive watching that maneuver. So your
Wow.
project manager did a good job.
Wow, thanks for asking about Twin City, though. We are so excited about that opportunity. We've been looking, I mean, my background is in housing development, and when I started with Good Sam in 2020, I felt that we had to get a new facility. And we looked at a lot of different locations, and we got lucky, I think, in that we found the Twin City Motel
Right.
was available. We negotiated an agreement with Reg and Donna Gagnon, who owned
Yeah,
it.
lovely people.
Really
Lovely.
nice folks, and they did a great job of offering hospitality there for many years, and we were successful in purchasing it, and our hope is that by this June we will be up and running.
Oh, good.
Yeah, and we'll have 35 beds available.
And how many do you have now?
Well, right now we have altogether 50. So this potentially adds
This'll add
35.
Yeah, great.
Although I do hope that we can stop using the church basements. It's not really a great solution.
Right.
So, but to have 35 good beds,
Yeah.
each of, for those who have seen the Twin City Motel, it's, they're kind of stacked rooms in a row. Each room will house 2 people. And, but they're going to be small rooms, but very nice rooms with a small bathroom and a refrigerator. They'll be insulated, heated, air conditioned.
Yeah, those windows are serious. I told you that before. Those are some serious windows you have, because you're trying to be environmentally friendly, and they'll do it.
They're super insulated.
Yep.
But it's not only the rooms. In addition to the rooms, we're going to have what we call the Welcome Center at Twin City. And it used to be the Gagnon's home.
Right.
And we're converting that into a welcome center that people will be able to come in for a meal or to sit and relax, watch TV. And not only that, they'll be able to meet with a service professional. That's something we haven't had. We have no space in our current
That's
shelters
great.
for like a
Private meeting.
for a psychologist
Yeah.
or a housing counselor to sit down with you and talk to you confidentially
I
about
told you
your
I was
situation.
very upset what you're going to do with that house, because if you're going to tear it down, I was going to come up and knock on your door. That is one of my favorite houses in Berlin. It's a beautiful home.
Really is.
And they really positioned it really well, overlooking the inn. What a great place to live and work, you know.
And now to have the headquarters of Good Samaritan Haven, our
Nice.
welcome center.
That's
I
nice.
mean, we're thrilled, and I just have to say, I mean, we did get some public funds for this, but the community was so supportive.
I bet.
Starting with the town of Berlin, their select board.
Yes, us, yeah.
They were there for us, and we had a lot of financial support from the community as
That's
well.
great. This is a very generous area, and I will say, from COVID, I don't know if Ben's experienced this in Burlington, and maybe Chris, he's calling in from Massachusetts, Boston, but people seem to be incredibly generous during COVID, more so than usual, because I think they realize how bad it is and how people are struggling. That's just my personal experience, that whenever we've asked for things, they've come true.
Pat, my job has really been hard the last 2 years, but it's been incredibly rewarding. It feels like almost every day somebody is extending their hand to try to help
That's
us.
great.
And I just happen to be in the middle of that. They get my number, they have my email, and I have people that say, hey, we want to help. Hey, we got a stimulus check. We don't really need this.
Whoa.
Can you guys use this?
Oh,
And,
let me think about that.
so that has happened again and again and again and again. So
I have to tell Ben, Rick was the executive director, I think that's the right title, of the Pine Street Inn in Boston. Have you heard about it? It's like legendary. It's been there for a long time.
well,
right?
I have to make a correction.
No.
Oh, what? Wait.
I was on the staff of the Pine Street
Oh,
Inn,
you weren't
and,
in
I
charge?
wasn't the executive director.
Rick.
Yeah. But I'm pretty familiar with that program.
No, I haven't heard of it.
Oh, you have to check it out. When we were talking, it sounds like a fabulous place. So, well, that'll give you some learning.
I'll look it up.
Yeah.
Well, Pine Street Inn, let me educate you here, Ben, is Boston's primary shelter program. If you go down the Southeast Expressway, you may notice a Venetian tower that you see off to the right in South Boston, and it used to be a fire station
Cool.
belonging to the Boston Fire Department. It was later purchased by the Pine Street Inn, and that's where their shelter headquarters is. And when I was working there in the God, it was so long ago, early '80s, they were housing 500 to 700 people
Whoa.
a night there. So
In this one building?
they had multiple
Oh,
sites.
did they? I bet.
Yeah.
Yeah, I bet. There you go. You have to check
Crazy.
it out and report back, Ben, because it sounds
I
fabulous.
will I'll report back on that, on what I find.
really.
Okay.
So Rick, we did notice on your website you have a strategic plan that you've been developing, and definitely curious to hear about that. I mean, it sounds like the purchase of the Twin City Motel is probably part of that strategic plan to expand the number of beds and your capacity.
Yeah.
But tell us a little bit about that plan and what your process has been around it.
Yeah, we started working on that plan right at the start of 2020. We had pretty extensive involvement of our board of directors, stakeholders like Sue Minter at Capstone,
Right.
Mary Moulton, another great
Two
champion.
of my favorite people.
Yeah, and our guests, we invited our shelter guests to participate, and I think we came up with a fantastic plan. One of the key features of it was to expand our shelter capacity and develop, what's called a trauma-informed facility, that people can really get decent and supportive shelter, and we've been successful with that. But there's much more that we have to do. For example, we've really learned during this COVID thing, maybe all of us, not just our program, that how essential healthcare and access to healthcare is. And so that's one area of our program that we're looking to significantly expand, that we're providing people who are experiencing homelessness with good access to healthcare.
Yeah. Oh, and may I ask you, when somebody comes in an emergency, what's available to you from a healthcare? I mean, are there physicians on call that support you, that you can call and say, hey doc, we need somebody, or is it the ER system which needs a little help, if I could say so publicly?
Well, great question. And you guys, you're concerned about policy and public expenditure. Think about it. We have let's say somebody comes into the shelter, and they could have a fairly modest healthcare need, and what the solution in the past is to send them over to the emergency room.
Good luck with that.
And it's on the public dime probably, and so we have to develop solutions that are less costly, more immediate, and that will work better to help those folks. So, this COVID thing helped us to engage some of those kind of partners that we need to have, like the People's Health and Wellness Clinic.
Yes, I was just thinking of them because they've moved over to Spring Street? No, I forget where they've moved, but that is a fabulous, fabulous service.
Great program, and we've become close partners with them over the last 2 years.
Yep.
We ran a vaccination and testing program with them in 21. They're located in the building that was the Granite Industries office building.
Yes, okay.
Right on the green.
Over by the circle. What a beautiful place.
Yeah, and thanks to Tom Lozon for helping out with that.
Oh, that man. He's involved in everything, thank God. Ben, the People's Health and Wellness Clinic is a place where people can go for free, and they have actual doctors there, dentists, and any service that you need. And I don't know whether psychological, I'm assuming everything, that's voluntary on the physician's part. So there's no cost, and they're right there for you. I mean, you have to make an appointment to walk in and expect to see a doctor, but it's all free. And I know some young family that first moved in here who were really struggling, and they went to the People's Health and Wellness Clinic. So it's for families, it's for working families that you just need, if you don't have health care, they provide it for you. It's great service.
It really is, and we're delighted to be working, to know them better now and to be working more closely with them. Another very important partner and a great resource here in Washington County is Central Vermont Home Health and Hospice.
Oh, yes.
Really important program, and they've also been very helpful to us over the last 2 years.
I was on their board for a long time.
Oh, great.
And I just know them all, and I help them as much as I can with doing fundraising and that sort of thing, and getting signatures for the ballot and that sort of stuff. I also learned, it's a little separate from what you're doing, but you can, when you look at a McMansion, you cannot judge what's happening behind that door. Because I went one time to a house, and the gentleman who lived in this McMansion, and you're thinking, what problems could he have? We were trying to help his wife because she had a stroke, learn some really basic stuff. And so you shouldn't really judge. And you shouldn't judge the people that you serve either.
It works both ways. It's interesting that you said that you just have to be careful about how you think about people and just treat everybody with an open heart. Well, people of wealth, they're trying to help, and we've just been so fortunate. We've had some people that maybe they live in McMansions. I don't even know where they live, but I think they have some resources, and I'm so thankful that they reached out to us and helped us. We had one donor that contributed a very substantial sum for the
Good.
Twin City project, and I'm not sure how we would have got there without it.
Nice, that's great.
It takes a village, right? That's
It takes
the
a village.
moral of the story.
Yep, that's
Takes a
it,
village.
takes a village.
Speaking of that, we've got only a few minutes left here before we've got to start wrapping up. But are there volunteer opportunities, opportunities to donate to upcoming projects? Like, how can people get involved in what you're doing, knowing that this is a great time of need, for housing and then particularly at this moment in time, for just a warm place to sleep at night?
Yeah, thanks for that question. Normally, I would be encouraging people to come to us and volunteer. In the past, we've had people helping out at the shelter or serving. Unfortunately, we can't do that during COVID, but we do. People are still helping out by donating meals, food to us. There are some. We are taking some clothing. It has to be limited because there's only certain things that we need for our guests. So those things are still very, very important to us. And of course, financial donations, we do need that. We have to raise about 1/3 of our budget every year privately. So that's very important. And if somebody is so inclined to do, to either donate a meal or clothing or a financial donation, they can find out about that on our website.
So Rick, you've got 3 people that now have COVID. How?
5, actually.
Oh, 5. Oh, that's
Yeah.
even. So do you have to shut down completely because you've been exposed and have to quarantine? I mean, how are you operating?
Very, very carefully
I was just
and
gonna
with
say
great
that.
worry every night.
Right.
No, we moved people out immediately. We
Oh.
are, folks are probably familiar with rapid testing,
Yep.
the antigen testing. One of the smarter things I did was to buy 500 antigen tests in
Good
December.
for you. They are in hot
And,
demand.
Somebody suggested that it might be important going forward. And so we have had our own program of rapid testing. We were able to identify those 3 individuals who were
good.
at the Christ Church.
Yep.
We moved them out the next day to this facility in Burlington. And then we identified 2 individuals at our other shelters the same way.
Yep.
And we moved them out to private motel rooms. And now we've been engaged in a broader testing and vaccination program. Just today, we had the Vermont Department of Health at 2 of our shelters, and we had testing in the morning and testing in the afternoon.
Great.
So
Good.
that's how we're doing it. We're trying to stay on top of it as best we can.
Well, and so volunteers can't help, can they? Because you're under quarantine or you have nobody at your facilities. Is that
I'll
also-
tell you the stuff that really causes me to stay awake at night is about not having staffing. And but somehow, miraculously, we've been able to patch that together.
That's
And
great.
I just, I have to say, day after day, I am so impressed with the courage of our staff
Right.
and their kindness in these situations. And it's not an easy job, but our folks are doing it day after day.
Right. Well, because I don't know where people are that are actually capable of working, because you go and restaurants are closed Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday because there's no staff. Just right here at ORCA Media. I mean, it's just terrible.
It's tough, but
Yeah.
yet, for some reason, people are interested in working for the Good Samaritan Haven.
Well, it's a good cause.
I think they're just called to it in some way, and so fingers crossed that.
Well, I have a feeling when they go home, they feel satisfied with.
I
what
hope
they've done
so.
that day.
I hope so. We're trying to treat them right. So.
Yeah, good for you.
Well, Rick, thank you so much for joining us. This has been an awesome conversation, and we're really excited to hear about what you've got in the pipeline here, and hopefully we may be able to have you back on next summer, or go to the ribbon cutting for the new
Yep.
facility, and excited to see how that unfolds.
I was just going to ask if we could make an arrangement. I'd like to take some pictures of the new Twin City and put it on the end of this video, if that's okay with you.
Absolutely,
All right,
of course.
cool. We'll work a deal. You better we'll pick a warm day. All right. Well, thanks, Ben. Thanks, Rick. Thank you all. This is Pat McDonald, and we will see you next week. And in the meantime, keep listening beyond the sound bites.